personal encounter. That's the thing, isn't it? It's that meeting, that worship is about that personal encounter with the divine. And interwoven in that is this idea of the light of Christ. I mean, this is when we start seeing this come in. That this light, this is something else which has also been changed a lot over Quaker history. One can argue that nowadays, among certain when you hear it used, sometimes it kind of is like, and this is actually mentioned in that Godless for Godless sake. It kind of becomes the light of this little light of mine, kind of very cutesy, little nice little. Oh, it's this thing that just keeps me warm. But the light of Fox's day was very different insofar as what its purpose was. Yes, of course, there was this connection with the divine, but there was also a sense of uh, personal transformation as well, for good and bad.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah,
ultimately for good, but that you recognize bad things in yourself and things like that.
yeah. So it's a bit like, I mean, there's a lovely quotation. Can't remember exactly where it is, but it's in Zechariah, I think, and it's about where God purifies the metal, so the fire of a furnace. And early friends are really keen on this idea because it gives you the sense of stuff that is kind of heavy or an accretion on you or a kind of distortion or blackening, that it can be somehow removed and left to one side. And so they saw worship as being like, like the person is a bit of metal on an anvil being forged. And that is really tough imagery
Really?
because that's not cutesy or cuddly. That's actually suggesting that it might hurt a bit. It might be quite difficult. It might be quite painful as a process because you have to look at aspects of yourself maybe you don't want to look at. And we all have these aspects, where the language of sin, I think, is important because it brings home the idea of mutual woundedness. Like, I'm wounded, you're wounded, we're all wounded. And we need to find a collective way, not just an individual way, of feeling whole, feeling healed. Liberal Quakerism, as far as I can see, has almost entirely given up on the language of sin, because for quite understandable reasons, actually. Because I think the language of sin can be weaponized, for homophobic reasons, or for sexual policing reasons, or for all kinds of, it's used as a weapon for social control rather than about the relationship between you and God. And I think the experience that people have of the way in which the language of sin is used is just a code for social conformity or something else, rather than getting to the sense that actually what the language of sin is about is that we live in a world where, we don't know how, we don't know why. We've got all these images, but we don't have a definitive answer to why it occurred. But there's a gap in the world between what we think the world should be and how the world is. And it's that fundamental existential gulf. And we all live that day to day. It's when somebody says, that's not fair. Or, why did that happen? We shouldn't let that happen again. It's that constant gap between, what is and what might be, I think. And so the language of sin is essential because it gives you a map from which to understand what the light is for. The light
Mm.
is about transforming you from being strangers to being friends, to feeling estranged in the world, to being at home in the world. And I think that comes across really beautifully in Fox's own mystical experiences. So when he says, that it was open to me, and he said he was taken up into paradise, past the flaming sword, and that he smelt creation anew. And there's a wonderful bit where he says, I knew all the virtues of all the creatures, which is really interesting, which is probably why Rufus James thought he must have read the Continental Mystics. Because the theory of virtue is the idea that if you knew everything's true name, you would know how everything worked. So this kind of is, this was the view of the medieval alchemists, that if you knew the inner essence of each thing, you could perfect it. But there was also this view among both Protestants and Catholics that Adam was the great doctor, the great physician. That at the
Mm.
beginning of the world, humanity knew everything about their surroundings, and that we were in complete harmony with creation. And that the fall is the great rupture, where we start seeing creation as an object to be used or exploited, rather than something to be cherished and something to be loved. So you can take the language of sin and fall however you like, but there are wonderful, beautiful complexities there, which I think Quakers would be unwise to throw away, just because we want it to be, modern.
Well, thank you very much for watching that short clip. I hope you found it interesting. If you'd like, please do click on the link to watch the full interview. And if you haven't already, please do consider liking and subscribing to find out more about Quakerism in Britain today. Thanks very much.